Hi, my name's Ollie, and in this Politics Explained video, I'm going to go through everything you need to know about the Republican Party in Edexcel A-Level Politics. I'm going to start by looking through the parts of specification this video covers and the key potential essay questions you could get asked on the Republican Party in the exam. I'm then going to start by giving you a history of the Republican Party and its policies, then going into the general policy attitudes of the Republican Party, looking at their conservative attitudes on social and moral issues, more restricted government intervention in the economy, an acceptance of social welfare, but a preference for personal responsibility. Then, after going through the structure of the Republican Party, I'm going to look at the different factions within the party, looking at social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, moderates, and MAGA or Trump supporters, before finally finish off by looking at the balance of power and relationship between the different factions. The PDF you can see on your screen is part of an updated textbook on US politics for the Edexcel A-Level Politics course, which you can purchase on the Politics Explained website, where you can also find loads of other resources to help you in your Politics A-Level, including detailed essay plans, updated textbooks for different parts of the course, where there are really detailed notes, as well as a place to sign up for tutoring if that's something you'd be interested in. Let's get into it. So starting off with the parts of the specification this video covers. So you may have seen the previous video on the Democratic Party, and this is effectively the equivalent for the Republican Party. So it's kind of in US democracy and participation in the kind of key ideas and principles of the Democratic and Republican parties, looking at the distribution and power and changing significance of the parties. So we're going to look at the key kind of policy attitudes of the Republicans, as well as the conflicts and tendencies and changing power and influence within the parties, looking at moderates, social conservatives, and fiscal conservatives. But also, since this kind of spec was written, you've seen the massive rise of the MAGA crowd and the Trump supporters, which are now completely or very much dominant. So we're going to kind of bring those in as well. In terms of the final video on party policy, so we've done the Democrats, this one's going to be on the Republican Party. Look out for the next video, which is also going to look at kind of comparing the two parties, as well as looking at the coalition of supporters for each party. In terms of potential essay questions, similar to the Democratic Party questions, you can get 12 markers kind of comparing the Republicans with the Conservatives. You get more general 12 markers comparing the kind of parties in the US with the parties in the UK in terms of their policies, or potentially within their factions and how divided they are. And on the 30 markers, you can get a question just on the Republican Party potentially whether it's highly divided. You could also get lots of different questions. You can also get ones comparing the Republicans and Democrats. So are their policies more similar? Are the Democrats more unified than the Republicans? These are definitely not the only questions you get asked, but they will be useful ones potentially to prepare, and there'll be some of these key ones will be in the essay plans on the Politics Explained website soon to help you prepare for the exam. But as I've mentioned in a lot of previous videos, the US kind of essay questions are kind of less easy to predict. They're more kind of cross-cutting across different topics. So it's not just about kind of preparing essay plans and knowing some key ones. It's also about really knowing the content really well so that you can use it for more complicated, cross-cutting, and different questions that come up. But yeah, let's start off by having a look at the history of the Republican Party and its policies. Starting off with its formation in the Civil War era. The Republican Party was founded in 1854 and emerged as a Northern party strongly opposed to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed for the potential expansion of slavery into the territories. This anti-slavery stance was central to its early policy positions. Under Abraham Lincoln, the party's policies focused on the preservation of the Union and the abolition of slavery, culminating in the Emancipation Proclamation and the eventual passage of the 13th Amendment. The party also supported the Homestead Act and the establishment of the Trans-Continental Railroad, reflecting a commitment to economic development and westward expansion. And Lincoln's presidency marked the shaping of the president's early identity, combining moral issues like slavery with economic growth and modernization. Then what you have is the Gilded Age and the Progressive Era. So in the post-Civil War period, the Republican Party's policy shifted towards focusing on economic development, supporting high tariffs, and the gold standard to foster industrial growth. This era saw the rise of powerful industrialists, often aligned with Republican interests, and the party's stance during this period was characterized by support for big businesses and a laissez-faire economic approach. However, under the progressive era of the party, led by Theodore Roosevelt, the party embraced progressive reforms, including antitrust, which is kind of anti-monopoly, and reforms to break up monopolies, and regulations for food and drug safety. Roosevelt's tenure marked a significant shift towards using government power to regulate industry and improve social welfare, a departure from the party's earlier economic policies. And this period demonstrated the party's abilities to adapt and respond to demands for reform during a time of rapid industrialization and societal change. What you then have is the Great Depression and the New Deal response. So the onset of the Great Depression challenged the Republican Party's long-standing economic policies. Herbert Hoover's presidency, which began just months before the shock market crash of 1929, was marked by a belief in limited government intervention, which proved largely ineffective in addressing the economic crisis. His policies, such as the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act and tax increases, were seen as inadequate responses to the spiralling economic conditions, and this highlighted a critical juncture for the party, as the subsequent Democratic New Deal programs under FDR shaped the American political landscapes. Crucially, make sure you know this was not the Republican Party, it was the Democratic Party, and the Republican opposition to this Democratic New Deal centered around a belief in smaller government and fiscal conservatism, setting the stage for the party's post-war economic philosophy. In the post-World War II period and Cold War era, the Republican Party's focus on anti-communism became a defining aspect of its foreign policy, particularly during the Cold War. This period saw the party advocating for a strong military stance and a robust approach to international relations to counter the influence of the Soviet Union. Domestically, the party continued to champion free market economics, though there was a balancing act between these principles and the need for some government intervention, as seen in Eisenhower's support for the interstate highway system. The era of Reagan marked a significant shift within the party towards more conservative economic and social policies. The mid to late 20th century was an era of dominance for the Republican Party, and Reaganomics, similar to Thatcherism in the UK, it was characterised by substantial tax cuts, deregulation, and reduced government spending, and it became a hallmark of the party's approach. Additionally, the party started taking more conservative stances on social issues, influenced by the rise of the evangelical Christian right, which emphasised the traditional family values and abortion and gay rights. This is where you see, very similar to when we looked at kind of the conservatism, but also the Conservative Party, the New Right. This is kind of a key New Right philosophy, similar to Thatcher in the UK. In the early 21st century, you saw kind of new challenges in the Republican Party adapting its policies accordingly. In particular, its support for limited government intervention was challenged in the face of foreign wars, which caused significant financial pressures. Under George W. Bush, the party's focus shifted dramatically following 9/11, with national security and the war on terror becoming central concerns. This period saw significant military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq, reflecting a willingness to use military force unilaterally. Domestically, the Bush administration implemented significant tax cuts and pursued education reform through the No Child Left Behind Act. However, the party also faced significant internal debates over issues like immigration reform and government spending, particularly in the wake of the financial crash. The party's stance on kind of social issues remained conservative, though there were growing divisions within the party about how to address these issues in a changing social landscape. Crucially, in relation to understanding the party today, is the shift under Trump from 2016. So Trump's ascendancy to the presidency in 2016 marked a profound shift in the Republican Party's policy attitudes, reflecting a turn towards nationalism and populism. Trump's America First doctrine represented a departure from traditional Republican free trade policies, leading to a skepticism of international trade agreements and the imposition of tariffs. Immigration reform became more restrictive, with a focus on building a border wall and implementing stringent economic immigration enforcement measures. Trump really came from outside of the party. He was by no means an establishment figure, and in the past voted for the Democrats. And he kind of effectively came in, connected with the Republican voter base, was able to almost very significantly transform Republican Party policy in a way that wasn't very dependent on its previous policies. So really redesigned the Republican Party. The party under Trump also took steps to dismantle key aspects of the Obama legacy, particularly in healthcare and environmental policy. And Trump's approach to foreign policy was characterized by a skepticism of traditional alliances like NATO and an unconventional approach to adversaries such as North Korea. Domestically, the party's stance hardened on social issues, with a strong alignment with evangelical Christian groups, further polarizing the party's base and the American electorate. There was initially significant opposition to the shift in the party under Trump from certain sections of the Republican Party, including in Congress. However, as time went on and Trump continued to be extremely popular with a large section of the public, this opposition has decreased and the party has fallen in line behind Trump and his policies. So that was an introduction to the Republican Party's historical development. What we're going to have a look at now is the general policy attitudes of the party. Firstly, key kind of policy attitude is a conservative attitude on social and moral issues. So the Republican Party traditionally upholds a conservative perspective, emphasising individual responsibility, Christian values, and limited government intervention. On racial issues, Republicans advocate colourblind policies and individual merit, advocating for an approach where government involvement in enforcing racial equality is minimised. This is evident in their general opposition to affirmative action programmes and support for voter ID laws, which they argue are necessary for maintaining the integrity of elections, even though they disproportionately disenfranchise black voters. On abortion, the Republican Party has consistently opposed Roe v. Wade, advocating for more restrictive abortion laws, and the Republican Party president under Trump nomination of conservative justices resulted in the overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022. In terms of its stance on LGBTQ+ rights, Republicans have traditionally taken a more conservative stance, historically opposing same-sex marriage and supporting policies that adhere to traditional Christian definitions of marriage and gender roles. However, there's been some evolution in this stance among certain segments of the party, with increased acceptance in recent years. On crime and criminal justice, the party typically emphasises law and order, advocating for tough on-crime policies, including support for stricter sentencing laws, the death penalty, and limited reform of the criminal justice system. And the party also strongly supports Second Amendment rights, opposing most forms of gun control and advocating for the right to bear arms with minimal government regulation. Next key one of their policies is a more restricted government intervention in the national economy whilst protecting American trade and jobs. The party generally advocates for more restricted government intervention, emphasising free market principles, reduced regulation, and the protection of American trade and jobs. The party's approach to economic stimulus often prioritises targeted measures over broad-based government spending, as seen in their mixed reactions to pandemic relief packages, where they advocate for more targeted aid rather than huge sums of money, with concerns about the national debt and about inflation. Republicans strongly believe that the free market capitalism is efficient and argue that minimal government interference leads to strong economic growth, innovation, and job creation. And this is also linked to their strong support for federalism. This philosophy can be seen in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which significantly lowered corporate and individual tax rates to stimulate economic activity. The party opposes extensive regulation of businesses, arguing that it hampers economic growth. This can be seen in their criticisms and efforts to roll back aspects of the Dodd-Frank Act. And Trump rolled back numerous environmental regulations established under Obama, particularly those provisions of the Clean Power Plan, to reduce what he viewed as burdensome constraints on businesses and boost economic growth. On trade, Republicans have historically championed free trade agreements as a means to open up foreign markets and promote domestic economic growth. There's been a shift in recent years towards a more protectionist approach under Trump. Under the Trump administration, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement was negotiated as a replacement for NAFTA, with revisions aimed at boosting American manufacturing and labour standards to protect American industries and jobs. Trump imposed tariffs on steel and aluminium imports from various countries, including traditional allies, as part of his strategy to protect domestic industries and negotiate better trade terms. We've seen this move away from free trade to protectionism under Trump. In healthcare, Republicans have consistently opposed the Affordable Care Act, advocating for market-based solutions and more limited government involvement in healthcare, arguing that competition and consumer choice lead to better quality and more affordable healthcare services. And the key final one we're going to have a look at is acceptance of social welfare, but a preference for personal responsibility. So the Republican Party does acknowledge the need for some social welfare programs, but emphasises personal responsibility and limited government involvement as key principles in their approach, seeing this as essential to maintaining a healthy, self-reliant society. They recognise the role of foundational social welfare programs like Social Security and Medicare, but often advocate reforms to ensure long-term sustainability, such as raising the retirement age or introducing means-tested benefits. This is driven by concerns about fiscal responsibility and the desire to prevent these programs from becoming overly burdensome on the economy. In healthcare, they've consistently opposed the Affordable Care Act, advocating for market-based solutions, effectively privatised healthcare, and more limited government involvement in healthcare. They argue that competition and consumer choice leads to better quality and more affordable healthcare services. And during his presidency, Trump and the Republican-controlled Congress made several attempts, though unsuccessful, to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Regarding welfare programs such as food stamps and unemployment benefits, the Republican stance usually involves advocating for more stringent eligibility criteria and work requirements. This reflects their belief that welfare should be temporary and not a long-term dependency, promoting the idea of self-sufficiency. So the Farm Bill of 2018, backed by many Republicans, proposed strict work requirements for food stamps, mandating that able-bodied individuals without dependents work or participate in job training for at least 20 hours per week to receive benefits. And they've been critical of expansions in welfare programs and in education. They've placed kind of a strong emphasis on school choice, arguing that competition and parental choice lead to higher education and better outcomes for students. Again, showing kind of a kind of free market view that competition is really important. Okay, they were the key policy attitudes of the Republican Party. What we're going to have a look at now is the structure of the party. The Republican National Committee is the main governing body of the party, tasked with developing the party's political platform, strategizing for national elections, and conducting fundraising. It consists of representatives from each state and US territory, including state party chairs and vice chairs. So each state committee kind of has significant autonomy themselves, and they're pivotal in local organising and voter mobilisation. They kind of come together, they're kind of key leaders in the Republican National Committee. The chair of the RNC is selected by the sitting Republican president or elected by committee members otherwise, wields considerable influence over the party's strategic decisions and policy directions. Michael Whatley currently serves as the chair of the Republican National Committee. By far more important though, and by far the most important figure in kind of directing Republican Party policy is the president when they're in office. So when there's a Republican in the White House, they hold a pivotal role in the party, setting the political agenda, directing policy, and playing a crucial part in fundraising and campaigning efforts. Trump's leadership fundamentally changed the policies and personnel of the Republican Party, and even though he's not currently in office, he's by far the most important figure in the Republican Party currently, and by far the most influential figure, and therefore continues to really shape the policies of the Republican Party. Leadership within the US Congress is the key part of the party structure. It includes the House Speaker or Minority Leader, or Senate Majority or Minority Leader, depending on whether they have a majority in each house. And these leaders are key in shaping legislative strategies, uniting party members for key votes, and representing the party in discussions with the Democrats. Mitch McConnell has been a central figure within the Republican Party, as Senate Majority Leader from 2015 to 2021, and then Minority Leader, playing a pivotal role in shaping the party's legislative agenda and strategies in Congress. The Republican Governors Association also kind of is an important organisation, kind of bringing together the Republican governors across the United States. And there's a number of important Republican governors with significant influence across the United States. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, gained kind of national attention for his conservative policies, particularly in kind of education reform and immigration. And Greg Abbott, serving as governor of Texas since 2015, is recognised for his stance on border security, Second Amendment rights, and free market economic policies that have contributed to Texas's economic growth. There's also the kind of Republican Congressional Committee and Senatorial Committee, which promote kind of fundraising, campaign strategy, support for Republican candidates either for the House of Representatives or the Senate. The key final part of the video thing we're going to have a look at is the different factions within the Republican Party. So the party, much like the Democrats, can be seen as a broad church, embracing a diverse spectrum of political beliefs and ideologies. It ranges from traditional conservatives and libertarians to the more populist and nationalist wings, exemplified by the Trump-era shift. This variety allows the GOP to connect with a broad base of American voters, reflecting regional, economic, and social interests. Yet, this ideological diversity also poses challenges in terms of party cohesion and unity. And we're actually going to look at, kind of in the final part of the video, the kind of challenges and how Trump has sort of challenged this kind of challenges diversity in the party, and actually potentially becoming increasingly ideologically cohesive behind Trump. First group we're going to have a look at then are the social conservatives. They emphasise traditional values, what they call traditional values, focusing on issues like family, religion, and national identity. They champion policies that align with conservative moral and social principles, often drawing support from evangelical and religious voters. They've been influential in shaping the party's stance on social issues, reflecting a commitment to traditional social structures and norms. They're strongly anti-abortion, advocating for restrictive laws, and campaign strongly for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Generally oppose to same-sex marriage, push for policies that protect religious freedom, strongly supportive of the Second Amendment and gun rights, favour strict immigration policies, kind of advocating for increased border security, and on cultural issues and education, they often resist changes to cultural norms, opposing movements such as critical race theory in education and affirmative action, They advocate for kind of patriotic education and teaching of history, and view these cultural issues through the lens of preserving national heritage and values. Key figures include Ted Cruz, who's a senator and known for his staunch stances against abortion, same-sex marriage, and liberal immigration policies. He's a vocal advocate for religious freedom and aligned with evangelical voters and influences conservative discourse, notably on Supreme Court nominations and gun rights. Marco Rubio, a senator from Florida, championed social conservatism through his pro-life advocacy and focus on traditional family values. And Steve Scalise, a House Minority Whip from Louisiana, upholds social conservative values in the Republican leadership, again in supporting Second Amendment rights, pro-life legislation, and national defense. Social conservatism has been a cornerstone of Republican Party policy for decades, significantly influencing the party's platform and policies. Its influence remains strong, particularly in shaping the party's stance on social issues and in appealing to a base of voters who prioritise traditional values. This base of voters is highly valued and seen as key to Republican success in presidential and congressional elections, in particular in the Bible Belt. It was a key part, key number of Republican controlled states across the US. However, as societal issues have shifted, there are internal debates within the party about how to address these changing dynamics whilst maintaining core conservative principles. The next key faction are the fiscal conservatives or libertarians. They focus on economic responsibility, advocating for policies that promote limited government, low taxes, and free market principles, driven by the belief that reduced government intervention and fiscal discipline are key to economic growth and stability. They support low taxation, limited government spending to minimise the national debt and decrease the government's role in the economy. They favour deregulation, strongly supportive of free market capitalism, debt reduction, and generally supportive of free trade agreements, seeing them as beneficial for economic growth and consumer choice. Mitt Romney has been a vocal advocate for fiscal conservatism, often focusing on deficit reduction and prudent fiscal policies. And his approach includes balancing the budget, reforming entitlement programs, and promoting responsible government spending. Leaders such as Senator Rand Paul and former House Speaker Paul Ryan have been prominent advocates for fiscal conservatism, emphasising tax reform and budgetary restraint. And fiscal conservatism is associated with the House Freedom Caucus, which grew in power significantly in the 2010s on the back of the Tea Party movement. Fiscal conservatism has long been a key aspect of Republican Party ideology. The fact has historically influenced key party decisions. And its impact can be seen in later legislative achievements like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed under Trump. In the current political climate, fiscal conservatives continue to shape the party's economic policies, though they face challenges in reconciling their ideas with broader public demands for government-led social programs. And their stance remains crucial in debates over the federal budget, taxation, and the role of the government in the economy. Moderates within the party represent a centrist approach, focusing on pragmatism over ideology. They support policies that bridge the gap between conservative and liberal views, and making them key in bipartisan efforts. On social issues, they're more open to moderate stances on LGBTQ+ rights, including same-sex marriage and immigration reform. On healthcare, they do still favour market-driven reforms, but also maintain key aspects of existing systems like the Affordable Care Act, and have been important in stopping the efforts to overturn the Affordable Care Act under Trump. They're open to acknowledging climate change, supporting measured environmental policies, and they advocate for fiscal responsibility whilst recognising the need for some government intervention in the economy. Rather than being strongly supportive of gun rights and supporting no legislation to encroach on them like other Republican factions, they have a more nuanced approach to gun legislation, advocating for common sense gun laws that balance Second Amendment rights with public safety. And in foreign policy, they support a balanced approach, combining strong national defence with diplomatic solutions. Whilst fiscally conservative on tax, they can support more fair tax reforms that don't disproportionately benefit the wealthy, focusing on a balanced approach to taxation and government revenue. Figures like Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski represent the moderate faction, known for their centrist stances and willingness to cross party lines on various issues. Governor Larry Hogan is also an important figure as the governor of Maryland. Known for his pragmatic leadership style, he's gained popularity in a predominantly Democratic state by focusing on bipartisan solutions and centrist policies, particularly in areas like healthcare and environmental protection. Modern Republicans have historically been integral in shaping a more centrist approach within the party. Their influence is significant, especially in their kind of closely contested legislative matters and shaping the party's appeal beyond its traditional base. As political polarisation increases, though, they face challenges in navigating between party loyalty and their centrist principles. They've been demonised by the MAGA or Trump supporters in particular, often being primaried and being called Republicans, so Republicans in name only. The next and by far at the moment the most important faction in the Republican Party are the kind of MAGA crowds, so Make America Great Again, or Trump supporters, who championed a distinct populist and nationalist agenda heavily influenced by Trump's rhetoric and policies. Characterised by their vocal support for his leadership style and personality, they're advocates for a robust America First ideology, prioritising American sovereignty and advocating for policies that they believe will restore and protect the nation's economic and political independence. This includes a strong focus on economic nationalism, favouring policies that promote American jobs and industries, often through protectionist measures. Their approach to immigration advocates for strict border control and tough immigration laws to safeguard national security and American workers. And this faction's emphasis on these issues reflects a shift towards more populist sentiments within the Republican Party, highlighting a departure from traditional conservative policies in favour of a more nationalist approach. On immigration, they strongly advocate for strict immigration control, including building a border wall and stringent immigration enforcement. They favour protectionist trade policies to support American industries and jobs, moving away from kind of, for example, fiscal conservatives and moderates who support more free trade. And they present themselves as being on the side of normal American and American workers. They support an American first foreign policy approach, sceptical of multinational alliances and interventions, including the increasing scepticism for funding Ukraine in the war against Russia. And on law and order, they emphasise strong law enforcement policies and often oppose movements perceived as critical of police, such as Black Lives Matter. They support policies that promote domestic energy production, including fossil fuels, and oppose environmental regulations, which they see as harmful to economic growth. And they champion conservative cultural values, pushing back against what they perceive as liberal bias in the media. So they kind of oppose affirmative action, for example, and supportive, quite strongly supportive of abortion, or opposed, to abortion rights, and support the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Really, as seen in their kind of environmental policies, they kind of emphasise reducing government regulations across various sectors to promote business and economic growth. By far the most important figure is Trump. He's the movement's namesake and he remains the key figure. The direction of the whole movement is determined by him, his actions, social media posts and statements. Other key figures you can look at are Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's probably the most right-wing and Trumpian kind of member of Congress, known for her staunch support of Trump and his policies, advocating for a kind of hardline stance on various issues. Representatives Matt Gaetz and House Speaker Mike Johnson are both strong supporters of Trump, who supported his agenda and refused to accept his 2020 election defeat. The MAGA Trump supporters faction gained prominence with Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and has since become the most significant force within the party. Their influence is marked by its appeal to a base that feels underserved by traditional political norms, focusing on anti-establishment sentiments. The faction continues to wield considerable influence within the party, especially among the grassroots and in primary elections, reflecting a shift in the Republican base's priorities and political attitudes. However, this influence also presents challenges for party unity and its appeal to a broad electorate, with some moderate Republican voters refusing to vote for Trump, which played an important role in Biden's victory in 2020 election, even if there weren't that many of them. Important in allowing Biden to just win. In terms of the balance of power and relationship between the factions, the rise of the kind of Trump supporting faction since his rise in 2016 has posed a major challenge to the traditional factors and leaders within the party. Whilst there has been significant tension at points and some key areas of disagreement, they've also been able to work together at points to achieve kind of shared legislative and judicial goals. So there's been some success in working together. So under the Trump presidency, the party managed to unite behind many significant achievements, with Trump working effectively at points with the Republican leadership, in particular Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who belongs to kind of the old Republican establishment of social and fiscal conservatives prior to Trump. Examples of cooperation include the US Mexico-Canada Agreement, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and also the kind of Senate's confirmation of 3 Supreme Court appointments under Trump, which are really kind of a shared goal of all of the Republican factions. But there's also been significant tension. There have been strong disagreements between the MAGA Trump supporters and the rest of the factions, in particular the moderates. This has arisen at many points when Republicans in Congress stopped Trump from achieving some of his goals due to their lack of support when he was president. Trump and his supporters strongly criticised moderate and other Republicans in Congress as rhinos, Republicans in name only, whenever they opposed his policies or worked with Democrats to pass bipartisan legislation, such as when some Republican lawmakers voted in favour of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Under the Trump presidency, key areas of tension include funding Trump's proposed border wall in Mexico, which Congress didn't fully fund due to a lack of support from some non-MAGA Republicans, and repealing the Affordable Care Act, which failed for similar reasons. More recently, there have been significant disagreement over providing further military funding for Ukraine. So even though this has now been passed, it was strongly opposed by Trump and his supporters, and it was actually originally opposed by Speaker Mike Johnson, though actually, sorry, I wrote these notes a month or two ago. Mike Johnson eventually came around and voted for the bill. The response to the 2020 election and January 6th Capitol riot has also been a key point of disagreement. So the MAGA supporters parroted Trump's lies about the election being stolen, and many, including Speaker Mike Johnson, refused to certify the election results. They also strongly criticised Republicans who spoke the truth and recognised that there was no evidence for Trump's assertions. Some Republicans from the establishment and other factions, such as Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, certified the election results, but refused to impeach or convict Trump for his role in the January 6th insurrection. A small number of moderate Republicans, so 7 senators and 10 House Republicans, including Senators Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney, voted to convict or impeach Trump after his involvement. The number was so small as it was effectively political suicide within the Republican Party, due to the fact that the Republican Party voters and base are strongly supportive of Trump, and many of whom believed his lies in relation to the election being stolen. Since the rise of Trump, his supporters' policies and rhetoric have effectively taken over the party, due to their strong support from the Republican Party base and voters. They're very dominant within the party, as shown with the relative ease with which Trump was able to win the primary election in 2024. Even though some moderate Republican voters remain, they're strongly outnumbered, and this has led to many moderate Republicans in Congress and being forced out of the party in primaries or standing down as they know they'll lose. Mitt Romney, for example, has stood up to Trump as a senator, for example, voting for his impeachment for his role in January 6th, but has announced that he won't seek re-election in 2024. Republicans from other factions in the Republican establishment before Trump have been forced to fall in line behind Trump's rhetoric and policies if they want to keep their job, due to the strength of Trump's base among Republican voters. This is most evident in the fact that just 10 House Republicans and 7 senators voted to impeach or convict Trump, respectively, for his involvement in January 6th, despite clear evidence for his impeachment. Fiscal and social conservatives who were in Congress before Trump have been very successful in working with Trump to achieve key policy aims such as the overturning of Roe v. Wade and Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, however. Further, those in the Senate in particular have been able to stand up to him at points and prevent key parts of his agenda, the repeal of the ACA and border wall, whilst also working with Democrats to pass bipartisan bills he opposes, such as the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This is largely due to the fact they don't have to be re-elected after every 2 years, and many will be standing down instead of standing for re-election. So you see some of those remaining Republican Party establishment figures within the Senate still holding power, partly due to the electoral process. So yeah, that was everything in relation to the Republican Party. As I said, watch the other video on the Democrat Party, and there's a video coming next in relation to comparing the Republican and Democrat parties and looking at the coalition of supporters for each party, which will be really useful for the exam. Let me know if you've got any comments or questions in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video.